desk there. And hello, good morning, Commissioner Madden. Great to see you. So Commissioner Reed, you're on, correct? So if you would just like to start the committee for transportation and real estate, that would be great, sir, as you can take the first item on the agenda.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought we were doing the legislative things. Let me get over here to today's agenda. Let me grab one real quick from the front desk. Good morning. Everybody looks bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this morning. It's 8:04 in the morning, the 12th of March, calling the Real Estate and Transportation meeting to order. I see we have a full quorum. Commissioner Walker, Mayor Muntz, Commissioner Madden, and McCauley, and are here. I thought I saw Don's office light might have been on, but with that, we will start. We have two orders of business today, and I see, I don't see, and there's Mr. Davis. I presume, Palmer, you will give us this information this morning?
Yes, good morning. This is the first item is an agreement for the purchase of one of the first, not the first parcels needed for the South Wabash Avenue extension from Ariana Street to Hardin Boulevard south of the Parkway. This is 1405 South Wabash Avenue. It's a small parcel, probably about a quarter of a mile north of Ariana Street. It's one of 19 parcels that we're going to need to acquire for this project. We had the property appraised. It appraised at $38,150. We offered that to the property owner, and he agreed to accept that amount. So that's what the agreement reflects. It also provides for the payment of housing relocation assistance up to $51,750 to the property owner, and that's being offered in order to keep this property eligible for federal funding in the case federal funding becomes available for the construction phase, which is obviously the most expensive part of any road project. So potentially we could pay up to $89,900 between the appraised value of the property and the housing relocation assistance. And we'll stand for any questions. I believe Greg James is on the line if you have any technical questions. I think Commissioner Walker raises the question.
Bill Reed is trying to talk, but we can't hear him. I can hear him across the hall. I want to make sure he knows it.
I'm sorry. I was trying to look at the map at the same time and talk, and I see Greg on the map. How big a parcel is this? I couldn't tell on the map. I see it's a mobile home, an old mobile home on the back in there.
Yes, it's an old mobile home. Let me see if I can find my drawing here real quick. Just a second.
Based on the drawing, it looks like it's 8,000 square feet.
That sounds right. And we're taking about the west, I think it's 1/3 roughly of the property.
Greg, are we doing an entire taking of the site or just partial taking?
It's a partial take, but because of the that we're basically taking the west 1/3, it basically takes most of the backyard, which includes the septic and drain field. And so because of the orientation of the trailer or the mobile home, it can't be, and because of the condition of it, it can't be moved in order to accommodate new septic and new drain field. So therefore, according to the appraiser, it loses its utility. And therefore we're purchasing, we're paying them the $38,145, I think the number is, includes damage to the remainder. And basically the cure to that is to demolish the mobile home, cap the septic, and then to redo the drain field or rake the drain field. And then basically the remainder could be sold or redeveloped.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. James, Greg James, not, I guess, somewhat related to this, what we are here to share this morning with, but I know we've been working this particular project for several years now. What is the time, how's our timetable moving forward? I believe this is the first parcel in some sense that we've been to be purchased as we move forward with this particular road diet. Could you give me some kind of idea, or give us some kind of idea how we're moving and how is things timing wise, the scope of all of that, please?
Sure. We are underway with right-of-way. Our appraisal reports are almost complete for all the parcels. Major parcel remaining is the CSX parcel. They're still working on that appraisal. I should have another purchase and sale agreement ready for you to consider for approval at the April 5th commission meeting. It'll be another residential with another displacee. We're impacting their property to where the tenant will end up being relocated. So there'll be a few extra things in that one we'll talk about then. I've given ourselves about 18 months to accomplish the right-of-way. So I'm hoping that by this time next year, we'd have all the parcels acquired, possibly with the exception of CSX, just because it takes time to work through negotiations with them. But at this point, we do not have construction funding. So I still need to find the $24 million golden egg.
Greg,
I'm sorry, we would be ready to go to construction if we had funding, 24 months from now, and the right-of-way was in hand, we'd be ready to move forward. The plans and permitting's in place. We're still wrapping up some work with DOT south of the Parkway. They're transferring some right-of-way to us there, and but we would be good to go in about 24 months if funding were there.
My last question, if I could, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Moving forward with the southern piece of this particular road diet and the northern piece, which is under construction there now, do we have any gaps in between?
Polk County is working on a project right now between Ariana and Olive Street. And so that would, if they move forward with that project, that completes the corridor at that point. Because as you know, it's 4-laned between George Jenkins and Memorial. It's been improved north of Memorial to Crutchfield, and then our project picks up at Crutchfield and goes to Fairbanks.
Thank you, sir.
Greg, what's the status on the Beaker Road and the Turnpike Authority?
I had a conference call with them about 2 weeks ago, and we're revising a survey per their request. And as soon as I get that survey from our consultant, and we've already revised the plans as they've asked, that should be going forward. So I'm hoping that that transfer may become official in April or May.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion? I see a motion by Commissioner Walker and a second by Mayor Muntz. I'm sorry, I see a question by Commissioner Salvage.
Thank you, Tiger. Greg, I noticed in the write-up you mentioned contingent upon federal funding. Is it fair to say that if the administration passes an infrastructure bill this year, and this is speculative, that more federal funds for transportation will become available, and so Wabash Extension will become part of that mix, competing for funds against other county and city projects? Is that fair?
Yes, it's in the, and Chuck Barmby can probably speak better to it, but I know this is in our long-range transportation plan. Everything's been set up to make it eligible for federal funding, but it would compete, I would imagine, with other projects, within District 1, at least, if not statewide.
And as I recall, a few years ago, we had a vote on the commission in which we agreed to proceed. But I recall that there is another option of an off-ramp as we move forward. Are those options still available? Will this commission be faced with an option of proceeding or modifying this project?
Well, right now, with us in right-of-way acquisition, obviously each time that we have a purchase, so it comes to you for approval. And when we get to the point that we are in a position with, obviously you'll have to make a decision on approving funding for this project, as well as approving going forward with a construction agreement at the point in time that we publish a request for proposal.
Got it. All right. Thank you, Greg.
You're welcome.
I see that we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. It carries unanimously. Our second order of business, Mr. Palmer, the floor is yours.
Yes, second order of business is a proposed lease with ATP USA at the Airside Center south of the airport for office and classroom space. They would be leasing approximately 1,112 square feet of office and classroom space for aviation training and professional services. And we'll also be leasing 3 tie-down spots for aircraft. Term of this lease would be for 1 year with 2 one-year renewal options upon the mutual consent of the parties. Base rent for the property is $1,390 per month, or that equates to $16,680 per year, or $15 per square foot is another way to look at it. That would commence April 1st of 2021. The rent includes utilities, but would not include taxes, which would be billed to the tenant separately. The rent for any renewal term would increase at 2.5% for each renewal term.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, do I hear a motion?
So move.
I see a motion by Mayor Muntz, a second by Commissioner Walker. All those in favor, please raise your hand. It carries unanimously. That concludes our order of business today, and so we will adjourn our meeting at 8:15. Thank you, and see you guys later.
Okay, and 8:15 is precisely the time that we can begin our agenda study, I believe, as I'm looking here.
No, we have, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry, our legislative session with Mr. Schaub. I apologize. It's Mr. Schaub. You can take it away.
Well, good morning, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, commissioners. Hope that everybody can hear me okay. You'll see me twice on here, one on video, one on my telephone. So hopefully it's coming through without an echo. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you all this morning. Today officially concludes the second week of the legislative session. We began on March 2nd and, of course, as you know, go for 9 weeks. And in conversations that I had with members of the legislative committee, what we decided to do was on a couple of Fridays be able to give you an update as to where we are. Since we will not have a day on the Hill this year, I wanted to keep you abreast of the various issues that we are dealing with and areas where we'll need y'all to reach out as need be. So in order to facilitate this conversation in a short period of time, in the 15 minutes, I'm sending y'all weekly updates, but for today, we've modified it a little bit with a couple of key issues that we'll call opportunities and ones we'll call challenges. So with your permission, I'll kind of run through those quickly and then be happy to answer any questions on these or any other issues that you have or would like to know more about. So on the opportunity side, some major legislation that is going through right now, obviously, is dealing with COVID liability protection. The first bill to pass the House last week was House Bill 7, and that provides COVID liability protections for all local governments, state governments, businesses, churches, schools, all those entities that were open during the pandemic and were open in a safe, reasonable fashion. So that did pass the House overwhelmingly. It is in the Senate now. Just yesterday, the Senate sponsor has decided to merge that bill with separate piece of legislation dealing with healthcare liability protections. And so we anticipate that that will occur next week. They will marry those two bills together. Senate will send it back to the House, and the House will take it up and send it to the governor. We do not anticipate there being any difficulty passing that legislation. So that will provide peace of mind and protections for all the local governments and businesses that have been open during this time. Second issue we have here is the affordable housing budget. We have not seen the budget yet. That will be rolled out in the chairman's proposals beginning of week 4, so the week after next. And conversations are still continuing to fully fund the Sadowski Act. So we've had positive conversations that will hopefully be the case or very close to it. So we'll keep you apprised of that and let you know what needs to be done as we move forward as the budget begins its process of being unveiled. Another issue that took a change yesterday is a priority for local governments as well is the e-fairness and online sales tax. For many, many years now, the local business community has been asking for the online collection of sales tax for online sales. It has never gotten across the finish line. However, this year it does appear that it's going to get there. And the bill that is ready on the Senate floor would simply apply to all online sales and would collect approximately $1 billion per year for state coffers. And I believe the number for local government half-cent trust fund is approximately $279 to $290 million additional. Yesterday, the House and Senate leadership agreed that I believe it's the state portion of that funding will go to offset anticipated tax increases on the unemployment compensation trust fund. So they are looking for a way to make it revenue neutral on the state side, at least for the next couple of years, while they bolster the unemployment compensation trust fund and get it to a point where they don't have to raise taxes on local businesses due to last year's pandemic. With that caveat, the House is finally prepared to pass it. It did pass its first committee, the Ways and Means Committee, yesterday, and it'll come up in this final committee next week and should be a pretty quick passage after that. And I will double check. I know Mr. Brossart's going to have a question on, how is this going to impact the local government revenues, and I need to get some more clarification on that. And then finally, we have the municipal airport construction engineering inspection legislation. That's part of the transportation package. That's a priority for Lakeland Lender and Mr. Conrad. That basically protects airports from duplicative engineering costs. Now let's move into challenges. As you are well aware, I know you've received a presentation from your attorney, Segunda Fernandez, on the water issues that we've been dealing with up in Tallahassee, primarily the DEP rule ratification as it relates to CFWI. We were, I'll be honest, quite surprised when on Wednesday legislation appeared in the Senate. We have had multiple meetings with House and Senate staff and members to explain why the DEP rule ratification is very troubling and quite damaging to the local communities in this region. And a bill did appear on Wednesday in the Senate and will be heard on Monday afternoon. So we've done a lot of work on this, and I met with the Senate President's office yesterday and was assured that this is not a priority of the Senate President. They are not trying to fast track this through. It was simply a courtesy to DEP to schedule it for a hearing. And so we are working with the members of that first committee to let them know the impacts it'll have and, quite frankly, why it's bad policy. As Mr. Davis, I'm sure, has informed everybody, the litigation against this has begun at the DOA level. So this issue will be under litigation throughout the legislative session. In our opinion, it is completely inappropriate for the legislature to address a rule ratification while it is in litigation. We've had positive discussions as of yesterday afternoon with the House leadership, and it does not appear to be anything that they want to touch. So no guarantee, but we're hopeful that we're able to keep this from getting any further. And we'll certainly keep you up to speed on that information. Broadband infrastructure is another one that is causing quite a few headaches. This legislation that has been introduced in the House and Senate had its first hearing in the Senate this past week, and it purports to expand rural broadband opportunities by, quite frankly, handcuffing local governments and municipal utilities. So that is something that we are working really diligently on, working very closely with Cindy and Joel on that issue as well. Reclaimed water is another piece of legislation that we'll be working closely with Bill Anderson and the team out of the Water Utility Department. This is a priority of Senate leadership. to require that all domestic wastewater utilities have a plan for eliminating non-beneficial surface water discharges. There is an aggressive timeline that has been introduced in the legislation for that approval, and obviously a lot of the local water utilities throughout the state are heavily engaged in this issue. And then finally, the mid-block crosswalks bill has returned. This is something that popped up last year that would essentially eliminate the flashing beacons that we currently have for mid-block crosswalks and require either a hard light or no feature at all. The bills have not been heard yet. There's still a lot of work to be done, so we'll continue monitoring and working on that issue. And with that, that's about 10 minutes. I will be happy to take a breath and answer any questions that commissioners may have.
I have two. First of all, is on the mid-walk crosswalk. What is the motivation for that to eliminate those?
Unfortunately, it was a tragedy that occurred over on the East Coast about a year and a half ago. A family pushed the button for a crosswalk, and I can't remember the town, but unfortunately, the girl stepped out before checking to make sure a car stopped and was fatally injured. And so that was the impetus for the legislation, just thinking that the yellow flashing beacons weren't enough to get drivers' attention. But the way that the bill was crafted last year, and it's modified this year, but it would require either a hard red light at the mid-block crosswalk or the elimination of the crosswalk entirely and require people to go to the corners. It did have a significant fiscal impact last year as well on state and local, which is why I did not abandon it. But it was born out of tragedy.
That's a horrible tragedy, and there's been certainly a lot of money spent that would be reversed. So the second is on the service discharge of the water, and this may be something Mr. Anderson wants to comment on because I noticed he's on as well. How prevalent is that? What are some typical cases they're trying to eliminate?
I'd be happy to defer to the expert on this, but I know that part of what they are looking to eliminate are the discharges that we've seen in different communities into the Gulf, the Atlantic, into lagoons throughout the state. That is one of the driving forces behind it. The other, quite frankly, is to try to find, it's got a terrible name, but toilet to tap. There's an effort to try to make more potable water out of discharge. So those are some of the goals. The timelines are by the end of this year, he would have to have a plan in place for how to deal with his non-beneficial surface waters. But then I think 5 years after that is when you'd have to implement the plan. So it's an aggressive timeline. The goal is to be able to assure that there are not, lack of a better term, dangerous waters that are being discharged into our bays and estuaries. And I'll be happy to defer to Mr. Anderson for further information.
Bill, your mic shows that we can hear you, but we can't hear you. So perhaps you have a mute button pushed on your headset. Cannot hear you. No, sir. Okay,
Bill
so
has
we'll
the same challenge I do to go to meetings. Sorry.
Bill, is this legislation on your pro for or yeah, very much pro? Okay. All right. Commissioner Walker, and I think you had a question.
Well, I'm just making sure you facilitating this meeting. I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing.
Oh, you're right. You are the facilitator. I apologize. My bad.
Excuse me. Mr. Ship, I know you and I talked a couple of days or so ago as we were preparing to have the meeting today. My question is, I know as even just shared by by the mayor, the water discharge situation, and I heard, if I heard correctly, Mr. Anderson giving his thumbs up, saying we're moving forward with the particular situation. And I know this is something that's been on the radar for the last couple of years or so. Am I saying that right or wrong?
Yes, it has been. It was formally introduced last year, and then because of the big water quality package that the legislature tackled, they kind of set this issue aside for another year. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Bill was kind of giving a thumbs up, thumbs down. It's something that we're still working on, trying to figure out how to be able to move forward on this. So it's a challenging issue. It definitely will be a challenge for utilities. Explained to me by the bill sponsors, there is a lot of flexibility that is built into it as well. So hopefully just something that if it does pass, we'll be able to manage.
Okay, and secondly, I know the short-term rental situation went before the Senate Appropriations Committee on yesterday. Senate Bill 522 had an amendment that looked very positive. How does it look on the House side?
That bill is always a challenge, quite frankly, for them to be able to get across the finish line. I know it did change significantly yesterday in the Senate. Let me just pull up real fast. The House bill it's cleared its first two committees, and it's got one more in the Rules Committee. I'm sorry, that's on the, I apologize. Senate bill has cleared its first two committees and has one remaining. The House bill still has two committees to go. But again, that is obviously a very difficult issue in negotiations between local governments and vacation rental properties. So I would give it 50-50 at best. It's always a difficult issue to get across the finish line.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Mayor, unless there's any questions, I'd like to ask if I could have some time to share with my colleagues about the conference this week with the National League of Cities. It would not be, I think, appropriate right now because we're approaching the time for agenda study, but certainly want to share some things that need to be shared among my colleagues when the time permits. And I would think that have to be now Monday, or because we got these back-to-back situations coming up here in the next few moments.
There are some questions.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
sorry, I've been waiting for a couple minutes. I just want to thank Mr. Shep for providing this to us, this information ongoing during legislative session. I think it's going to be really helpful. And I want to echo that on the, there were a couple on the challenges that you said were not priorities of the leadership. And just for my colleagues, when it's not a seniority leadership bill, that's very, very helpful for us if they're against it. So knowing that with, you know, the water, the DEP rule, that hopefully, you know, that is not Senate leadership, that hopefully it will go away here relatively quick. And that it's really incumbent upon all of us to watch this throughout session, because at the end is where a lot of crazy stuff happens. So I appreciate the heads up on this. Thank you, Mr. Shep, for working so diligently for us, and Mr. Walker for leading us on this. But I feel comfortable with the 2 or 3 bills that you mentioned that aren't leadership priorities, because hopefully they'll go by the wayside.
Yes, ma'am, that is our hope.
I see we have
Commissioner Reed.
Yeah, Commissioner Reed, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner Walker. Dave, I saw in the news recently, is there some movement towards red light cameras on the school crossings at the school area?
I need to dive into that one a little bit more. I did see probably the same article that you did, that there's been talk about introducing those, but let me find out and get back to the commission on that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I see our city manager.
Mr. Strauss?
Thank you, Commissioner Walker. Just for clarification on the bill related to the reclaimed water, the reason why you kind of saw Bill Anderson with a thumbs up, thumbs down there is because we're seeking better clarification on the definition for non-beneficial surface water and what exactly that means. Depending upon that definition, it may or may not be problematic for us, but in the meantime, we are, seeking some alternatives that would, mitigate that should it pass. So that was the message that I think our water utility director, Bill Anderson, was trying to convey there. Unfortunately, we just ran into some technical difficulty. Thank you,
for the clarification, sir. Thank you for that clarification. And the committee members, Commissioner McCauley or Commissioner Reed, any additional questions from the committee or any other of my colleagues at this point, Mr. Mayor? Again, I ask that I would give some time, and I don't know how the time will be based on what we got scheduled today, but certainly want to share some things with you that was brought out and shared with during the conference this week, the National League of Cities Congressional Conference. And I can do that either Monday, or if we finally have some time later this morning, however our schedule will permit. I appreciate that. Unless there's any other things that may come before us, Mr. Mayor, it's back to you.
Commissioner Madden has had her hand up.
Commissioner Madden.
Oh, Commissioner Madden, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Can you hear me with my headphones in? Okay, great. I did want to just hear. I didn't remember if the broadband bill, if you said that it did not have support with senior leadership, or if it was one of the ones that does. But I was looking for an update from City Attorney Davis to see how this would affect our pole attachment ordinance.
I'll answer the first question real quickly. It is not a leadership priority. However, it's not a negative for leadership as well. So it is something that we're going to have to continue working very diligently on. I think the second question, and I'll defer to Mr. Davis.
Yeah, I've got to study it some more, but it doesn't appear to affect our pole attachment fees. It could affect our pole attachment ordinance somewhat as far as our criteria and restrictions on that. So it's something I need to study a little bit more.
Okay, and I just, as the broadband chair, it's a little bit disheartening when, bills are called rural broadband expansion, and really the only tool in the tool chest is to take away authority from municipal electrical, utilities to be able to, look at the hardening of our poles and our infrastructure, and to be able to charge appropriate fees for attachments. And that's the only way they think that they can expand rural broadband. Certainly they're only hearing from one side of the story, and that's the main, big providers who, I want to ask them if they're going to take all the savings that they receive from not having to pay to attach to poles and put it in a pot and then expand into rural areas. But this is really disconcerting that they would call it rural broadband expansion.
Well,
If I could just throw one last.
I'm sorry, Mr. Shep.
I was just going to say, if I could throw one last comment in there. There are a number of broadband bills that have been introduced this year, and the one that is leadership priority is a rural broadband program through the Department of Economic Opportunity. That bill is moving quite quickly. There are major differences between the two bills, and I'll be sure to get you a copy of that as well. But there are a number of items that are moving in this area. This is just the one that impacts municipal electrics directly.
Thank you, Mr. Shepman. Commissioner Madden, to your point, so you would know, that's broadband initiative was a very top priority during the discussion with National League of Cities as it moved forward, and how best, as you know, with you chairing that particular broadband discussion for us, it's important to have, and how best we can get it to make it happen for our local cities and communities here as well. So it was a top priority that was discussed during the time of the conference this week, being, I think, the number 2 out of top five priorities. It was number 2. So make sure you knew about that, because it's one of the things that NLC is surely keeping their fingers on and pushing through as best they can for our cities. Any other discussion before we close the meeting? Mr. Sherrouse, I see your hand up.
Thank you again, Commissioner Walker. Just for the benefit of the mayor and commission, you did receive an email this morning from Ms. Emily Colon with a summary of the report that you received from Mr. Shep this morning, and it was provided by Mr. Shep and the Southern Group. It's very helpful, so I just wanted to draw your attention to that. It's in your inbox if you have not yet seen that. And just real briefly, it's an unrelated matter, but there was also an attachment on that same email related to an item related to fire that we'll be reviewing later this morning. So you've received that as well, but I wanted to thank Dave Shep for the work on the summary. It's very helpful, and I think the commission will find it to be so as well. Thank you, sir.
You're quite welcome, and thank you
very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Shep, again, and I appreciate the conversation that we've had even this week about how we'll move forward. And it's just, I think Commissioner McCauley mentioned, and of course, as we go through the session, because our limited situations and meeting and not having be able to go to Tallahassee, we'll be able to keep in touch as you send us these particular weekly updates, and we appreciate that, sir. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Before we move on to this meeting being adjourned and back to the mayor? Seeing none, Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
Walker, for your chairman's role in that. Mr. Shep, thank you very much for joining us. All right, that brings us into the agenda study. We will begin the meeting at 3 on Monday. I will actually be in Tallahassee, so Mayor Pro Tem McCarley will be running this meeting for us. And we have an ACE update from Light Saloon House that we will be able to hear. And then we have 2 proclamations that will be read. That we will cover then the reports we just did in the 2 committees. So that brings us to the consent agenda, so we can take a look at the asterisk items beyond the minutes. There's item 6C1 on a design for West Pipkin Road widening.
Yes, thank you. Yes, as you know, the county is in the process of widening West Pipkin Road between County Line Road and Dorman Road. And we've previously entered into an agreement with the county to pay the county's roadway design consultant for the design work needed to relocate our water and wastewater utilities in that corridor that's being widened. So far, that cost has been $192,565. The county, subsequent to the first agreement we've had with them, has determined that they can widen West Pipkin Road between Dorman Road and South Florida Avenue. And so we're going to pay an additional amount under this amendment to the county so that they can get their roadway design consultant to design the relocation of our utilities between Dorman Road and South Florida Avenue. The not to exceed amount of those design services would be $53,585.
Questions for Mr. Davis on that? And because of its near inevitability, is there any objection to leaving it on consent? All right, we will leave it on the consent agenda. And then that brings us to the next item, which is item number 2 on the chlorine contact.
Yes, item number 2 is just to approve a short list of firms to do some design work for the Water Utilities Department related to Glendale. They've got a couple of pumps that they use out there to pump water to and from the McIntosh Power Plant, as well as the Matheson plant out off of Cummie Road for cooling water. These pumps are nearing the end of their life and need to be replaced. And in conjunction with that, we also need to come up with a new system to treat the water that is being sent to McIntosh and Matheson for treatment. So what this design project will do is to combine the new pump system with a chlorine contact treatment process to treat that coolant water before it's sent out to McIntosh and Matheson. So what this agenda item is actually requesting that you do is simply approve the short list of firms. There's a table at the bottom of the memo that you can see that ranks them. Hazen and Sawyer out of Orlando was ranked number 1. Tetra Tech out of Orlando ranked number 2. Rummel Klepper out of Lakeland was ranked number 3 in the process. And under the Consultants Competitive Negotiation Act, what you have to do is try to negotiate an agreement with the first ranked firm on price and terms. And if you can't do that, then you move to the second and so on. So we're asking your approval for the short list and authorize staff to try to negotiate an agreement with the firms in the order ranked.
Any questions on this? Any objection to leaving that on the consent? All right, so we will do so, sir. And the third item.
The third item, we're going to have some comp plan amendments coming up at the meeting in April, at both of our meetings in April. And under state law, at least one of those meetings has to occur after 5 p.m. unless the city commission waives that requirement. So this is simply requesting that you waive the requirement to hold one of those meetings after 5 p.m.
Commissioner McCarley.
Why would we, I know this is a real easy thing, but why would we move that to not do the statutory? Why was staff requesting to move it? And when would we move it to?
It would just simply be held at the same time as your regular meeting, the 3 p.m. meeting, as opposed to holding a night meeting. I don't know if that answers your question or not. But,
No, I was wondering, like, we would do it on a typical commission day. It wouldn't happen on a different day, and it wouldn't exclude the public for having any comment.
That's correct. It'd just be a regular commission meeting.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think you're agreeing. As I hear what you're saying. Okay. Any problem with leaving that on consent? I see none. All right, so we will do so. So then after the consent, we have a request to appear from the general public, and Paige Conister of Swamp Petals coming. Any comment on that, Mr. Davis?
Yes, we had a meeting with her and her partners maybe Tuesday of this week, Monday or Tuesday of this week. It was a good meeting. It was we had the police chief was there. We had representatives of community development, public works to hear their plan. And subsequent to our meeting, she's met with Julie Townsend of the LDDA, I believe yesterday, and I understand that went well. So she's going to come back to the city commission on Monday and actually go into what her specific business model is with some illustrations and whatnot. And then we've already provided her some proposed ordinance language, and we'll, depending on the city commission's direction on Monday, we can move forward with that.
Will the proposed ordinance language also be a part of that presentation?
No, I don't think we're ready to do that. Right now, just keep her business proposal.
Okay. Any questions on that by commissioners? All right, then that will take us to no equalization hearing on this meeting, and then public hearings. Item 1.
Okay, and we have 4 items that you heard last time, and we can go through those again, or just stand for any questions depending on how you want to proceed this morning. These will all be, well, the first 3 will be quasi-judicial hearings that will take place Monday afternoon. So just, I know Teresa's on the line and can go through the slides again if you would like.
What is the pleasure of the commission? Is anybody interested in going through the slides? Not that we don't appreciate your time and preparation, Teresa, I might add in that. Okay, Commissioner Sullivan.
I have a question. Palmer, you brought up quasi-judicial. Can you quickly go over the rules that our board has to abide by as we deal with these issues?
Sure.
Yeah.
The review standard that the courts apply to a quasi-judicial decision is a little bit higher than they would apply to just a regular legislative decision that the city commission makes. With this purely legislative decision, for example, the 4th item is establishing new rules for the nuisance abatement board. That's a purely legislative decision. And the courts are very deferential to the local government on that. With zoning actions, the courts are less deferential, and they require that any decision that you make be based on what they call competent substantial evidence. So you have to base your decision either on facts, be a very fact-based testimony, or on expert type opinion. You don't just have total discretion to decide I like this project, I don't like it, I can't really tell you why. It needs to be based on either facts and expert opinion. Otherwise, the courts will overturn that and send it back to you for another hearing.
I see. So are we permitted under those rules when we deal with the proposed ordinance down at Morgan Creek? Are we allowed to discuss the county's action that's outside our purview in deciding the vote on this issue?
Absolutely. They're tied together. It's all part of the same project. So
that's a fact that another elected body took action on that. So going back to the Caroline Lakes debate, that was also under a quasi judicial guidelines.
Correct.
And the one parcel on this particular application is being litigated. Is it being litigated because of the accusation that the county commission failed to act on facts?
Right. lack of competent substantial evidence.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you.
Is there any other questions by commissioners? Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. I did have a question on the Morgan Creek project. I didn't know if we want to go through the others or I don't want to jump into that until we're ready.
I have one on 4, so let's just do 3 and 4 if that's all right.
Sure. Is that when I don't have the agenda right? Is that 3? Is Morgan Creek 3?
Do you want
Yes, it is. Okay.
map pulled up to help or?
Well, so I wanted to, we have mentioned concerns about flooding in that area that we've heard before. And I know staff has spoken to that. I just I would love to have a recap on that. And if that happens Monday as part of staff presentation, I'm okay with that. But I just want to make sure as we continue to hear those concerns that we really have a handle on what's going on there and the potential ramifications of that development.
Yes.
Teresa, why don't you do that, please?
Sure. So we have a couple of slides related to flooding and stormwater, primarily that were taken out of the staff memo that Ryan Lazenby had provided to you several weeks back. So we are prepared to have that discussion on Monday. I don't know if there's anyone from Public Works that's available to go into that today, but that is one of the items that we will cover as being a primary concern of the surrounding residents.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to your point, Commissioner McLeod, I share the same kind of sentiment, but I know I did speak with Ms. Teresa here a couple of days or so ago. And let me just say, I appreciate the comments and information you did share, Ms. Teresa. It was very, even more eye-opening for me to be able to hear what the subject that you share. But I'm like Commissioner McLeod, I think we all need to be shared the information. So if that can be done on Monday, if I hear you correct, I think it would be very well received, I would think, to make sure that those concerns that Commissioner McLeod or myself and others have been hearing, and then I'm sure, like myself, maybe a couple of those folk have gone out to visit with those residents or who had made contact in some respect. As I shared with you when we spoke a couple of days ago, lady, I think we should hear that and make some, I guess, notice to make sure, the concerns that are being brought to us are being addressed.
And I do see Mr. Lazenby is on camera. So, and I do have a slide of the drainage basin that was in his memo, and then also another one showing the flood zones in the area, if you wanted to hear that information today.
Yes, let's do so, please.
Okay. Let me go ahead and bring those up. And do I have the ability to share my screen? Let me see. Yes. All right. So, Ryan, did you want to begin with this one here, just kind of giving an overview of the larger area?
Yeah. This is a really complicated drainage basin that spans multiple counties, multiple municipalities, and eventually discharges into the ocean. It's what we call an open drainage system, which means it does discharge in the ocean as opposed to a closed drainage system. So when developments are proposed, any major development activity, we do require permitting for that. And what the state has done is they've set up water management districts. One of the reasons they've done that is because some of these cross jurisdictional lines of municipalities and even counties. So what one city might do upstream could affect a property owners downstream. So the state has set up water management districts to permit stormwater management systems. And in the open basin system, they're primarily concerned with the rate of discharge. In a closed basin system, which simply means there is no outfall for the water, it's a cup with no outfall in it. And if you put more water than that cup has in it, you will flood properties. An open drainage system is more like the sink in your house. If you keep the water running while you brush your teeth, it's going to drain. It won't fill up. It will drain as long as you don't put 5 hoses in the sink and overwhelm what the drain can take. And that's what we have out here. So when we permit projects in an open drainage system, like I said earlier, we're worried more about the rate. And so the Southwest Water Management District in this case requires all applicants to demonstrate that they are not increasing the rate of discharge over pre-development conditions up to the 25-year, 24-hour storm event, which is approximately 8 inches of rainfall in 24 hours. So when I say a 25-year event, that means it has about a 4% chance of happening in a given year. In addition to that, the city of Lakeland goes a little further. We also require that same 25-year, 24-hour peak discharge rate, but we also require we have freeboard requirements, which means we want reserve capacity in those ponds over and above that, so the ponds don't overtop and flood off-site properties. In addition to that, we require developed properties to be developed over the 100-year floodplains. In addition to that, the Southwest Florida Water Management and the city of Lakeland requires flood compensation for any impacts to a floodplain. In other words, if you had a pool in your backyard and it held 20,000 gallons of water and you decided to fill in half the pool but still put that 20,000 gallons of water in there, that's going to fill up and drain out into your neighbor's yard. So anytime somebody proposes fill within the floodplain, we require them to excavate within that basin the compensating storage on a cup-for-cup basis. So there is a lot. It's not like we just approve development and we say, okay, do what you guys want. In fact, there is a lot of work that goes into flood protection and flood zone protection. That being said, development can impact off-site properties. And one of the ways they do that, and something that's actually happened out here in the Hamilton Road, is that developments typically where properties under like pasture property, it will sheet flow over the property, over the entire width of the property. And when a development comes in there and develops that, they will build a retention pond and concentrate that outflow. So where it might have been spread out over the property and the water, you barely see it coming off the property at the same volume of water. When you put that pond in there, you're basically taking a fire hose and discharging it to a point. And we do some things to make sure that we're not going to cause any erosion problems and things like that. But in the case of Hamilton Road, when you discharge water out into Hamilton Road right-of-way, which is a county facility, it's important that there is conveyances within that right-of-way and within these roadways or whatever is receiving this runoff to accept that runoff. And that's what we kind of find out in Hamilton Road, is that's a very rural roadway that wasn't really designed to handle a lot of development activity. It's a 2-lane road. There's not well-defined ditches. And as discharges are introduced to the roadway, there's a chance there that they will overwhelm the conveyances. In some places along the roadway, there isn't conveyance yet. There's a picture of it. So that's the roadway as it exists now. So when a development comes through and say, okay, this water has been going to this road since the beginning of time, and it has. And when we talk to the county, when we talk to City of Lakeland staff, these flood problems that have been out here for a long time. I talked to Greg James, and he said when Pipkin Road was 4-lane back in early 2000, he said the year after that, they thought the bridge was going to be wiped out with a flood surge in this same drainage basin, and they went back and checked their drainage calculations, and it's always been like that. But it is important, if you guys are going to improve development, or the county and or the city down these roadways, that we got to be careful not to make things worse by improving development without the appropriate roadway and drainage infrastructure to accommodate the development. So that's basically what the drainage basin the drainage memo I prepared stated, it kind of gave you a background of what kind of basin this is, the provisions we have in place to ensure that developments are not adversely impacting properties, and some things that would improve the situation out there. As far as probably need some improvements to the roadway there if we're going to be sticking a bunch of lots and things down there in the future.
Any other comments, Commissioner McCarley?
Thank you, Mr. Lazenby. And this might be more to Teresa or maybe in general to even Mr. Davis, but is the onus on the developer to explain to the people who purchase these homes, like what the flooding impacts are, or is that onus on the people who purchase the homes? Are they supposed to figure that out? I know we're trying to dispel it and we're trying to make sure that that doesn't happen, but if it's always happened,
Teresa, I'll try to answer that if you don't mind. Community development gave me about 91 pages of flooding complaints in the area. Some of them were due to just the lack of conveyance that's on the roadway. It was a pre-existing condition. In my opinion, it's not caused by development. It's always been there. Some of them were because the people are actually constructed homesteads within that kind of reddish area you see on your screen there, which is a floodplain. It's always flooded. It always will flood. A couple of them weren't even in the same drainage basin. One of them was from Riverstone, which actually drains to English Creek. One or two of them is where I believe people have made changes on their own property to access certain portions of their land and have actually made things worse. So there's a hodgepodge of it. They are all real. There's flooding issues out in that area. They are all real, but it's very difficult to pinpoint, hey, it's because of this development or it's because of solar panels. I don't think it's because of solar panels, but it's very hard to pinpoint one specific cause for that. The best I think we can do is moving forward is get infrastructure in place to help alleviate the existing flooding problems and to ensure that there are no additional impacts caused from development.
I think my question's more about if I'm buying property out there and I'm doing it in a neighborhood that's being developed, who provides me, or is it on me as the purchaser to look and go and dive into these floodplain, this 100-year flood information? Because I'll tell you from growing up in Northeast Polk County, we have a joke in our family that if people are buying property where there are cypress trees, it's going to be wet. So, if you have a cypress tree in your front yard, that's a good indicator that when we have a hurricane or something, you're going to be wet. So I was just, my question's more about who communicates. Does the developer communicate to people that this is a prone area? And I can see we're obviously not building in the red zones. I appreciate this map very much, but, some people are very surprised because they don't do that homework. And so is that our responsibility to communicate that out as a city? Or is it the responsibility of the developer, or is it on the homeowners to know that this always happened out there?
Right.
So a couple things. On newer developments such as these subdivisions and everything, as part of the development review process, we will ensure that all the lots are constructed above the 100-year base flood. And we do things like requiring letter of map revisions from FEMA where changes to the floodplain are proposed to document those changes and that these lots are constructed outside of the floodway. On existing property where somebody's just going to go plunk a house out there on 5 or 10 acres, typically you'll have to do a flood certification if a portion of the property is depicted in the flood zone. A surveyor would have to come out there, and this is really something that the bank wants to see when they're financing these homes when they're in the 100-year flood elevation, that typically that there'll be a flood elevation that will analyze that and kind of see where the finished floor is in relationship to the flood zone. But to more specifically answer your question, that would be kind of on the purchaser of the property typically.
I would agree with that. We do, as Ryan pointed out, we indicate on the plat of newer subdivisions where the 100-year floodplain is, and include a note that some of this platted land may be in the 100-year floodplain. But I don't know how many purchasers actually look at a plat, when they're going to buy a piece of property. I don't think there's an affirmative obligation on the developer when they're selling individual parcels to notify somebody of that. So it would require a little bit of homework on the purchaser's part.
They would know at the time of financing, and the insurance binding would reflect the floodplain in it as well. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner McCauley, because it is something that, I think is very important for people to know. And as a former, I guess I call it retired in some respect, also insurance agent that I had for 3 decades, in order to even, when you purchase a home, and if you purchase in the flood zone area, as I'm sure we all know, if you go get it financed, as it was just shared, you're required to make sure you get flood insurance. They're going to make sure you know it. You're in a flood zone, you're going to get flood insurance before the property, will be properly financed, and having the insurance company, whoever insurance company you go with, to make sure it's insured properly for the flood zone that you may be in, because some flood zones require, certain different kinds of dynamics involved to get the flood policy.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Teresa and Carson or Palmer, can you define the legal parameters of the term compatibility with regard to land use? Is that a legal, legitimate criteria to determine whether to vote for or against this project?
Yeah, absolutely. That's at the heart of rezoning considerations. It's just compatibility with adjacent property. It's a somewhat of a soft term, so it's a little bit hard to define. But it's absolutely appropriate. The courts will,
Can you or Teresa take a stab at defining it?
We actually have a definition of it in the land development code. I'll try to pull it up while we're speaking here.
Well, I don't need it today. If you could send it out, I'd appreciate it.
I was actually in the
I will
process.
say that it's still, even the way it's defined, it's still a fairly soft term that talks about harmony with surrounding land uses. So it's not going to, resolve the issue for you easily.
So it was drafted by a lawyer who said it depends?
Yeah, right. But the courts will, if there's, you have some facts to base it on, the courts will defer to a local government's decision as to compatibility.
Any other question on that, Commissioner Sullivan?
I did locate that definition, and
That's the end of my question.
I did locate that definition. It is, as Mr. Davis stated, pretty general, and it's very short. Compatible is in harmony with the surrounding land uses, context, building forms, and environment. So generally what you'd want to look at is, for example, lot sizes. Are these lot sizes compatible with surrounding lot sizes? Are the homes that are being constructed, are they the same size, for example, of the surrounding homes? So those are some of the things that you'd look at for compatibility.
As well as land uses. So is it an adjacent land use, commercial, residential, industrial, that type of thing?
Got it. Thank you.
And I just to go back to the whole discussion about what a quasi-judicial hearing is. It requires that you base your decision on evidence in the record at the hearing. And so we heard some information today. And if you want that to be part of your consideration on Monday, we need to hear that information again on Monday afternoon. The flood maps and discussion about that.
And I think we want to do that for the general public as well. So yes, we'll make sure we do that. Thank you, sir. Any other questions on this one? All right, I'd like to go to 4 and have you walk through that a second. And the reason, and I have a specific question. I love this because we're expanding our nuisance provisions in this one. And Jared, I appreciate you working on this, or Mr. Simpson on this as well. But the thing I want to make sure there's some clarity on in my own mind is where many of these scenarios need to be utilized and our nuisance criterion strengthened is in renters of property. And if we have indifferent homeowners to those nuisance, does this in fact allow us to go to the homeowner who does not address the nuisance of the renter? So that's kind of specifically my question.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Yes, this it does allow us to do that, and that is frequently in the cases that I've seen historically in Lakeland, where the board has taken action. It has been related to a tenant and kind of an absentee landlord situation. So it does allow us to take action in that scenario. The only thing that it changes is that, and this is due to the change in the state statute, is that it gives a property owner a defense when they do take action within 30 days after the board declares the property a nuisance, and it gives the property owner reasonable time to act, and then the board needs to essentially recognize that action and release the property from whatever conditions that they may have placed on the property. Typically, what we will do is we'll board up a property, and the tenant will vacate the premises. I think with the new defense, if the property owner takes the action, evicts the tenant, or does whatever else may be appropriate to stop the reoccurring criminal activity, then we will not need to board up the property and take that additional step.
What happens if on eviction rights for that tenant within that 30-day period of time?
Well, we aren't able to take action that would conflict with the landlord-tenant laws. So while we do apply pressure through this process, we have to recognize the landlord-tenant laws, and so I think that would be one situation where if the board ordered a deadline that was not compatible with the eviction timelines, and the property owner was taking steps to legally evict the tenant, we would have to recognize those steps and delay our deadlines from the nuisance abatement board in order to acknowledge the rights of the tenant.
Okay, well, what I love is it absolutely strengthens our ability to do something with tenants. And so I'm very appreciative of this. I just had those questions because wondering if the 30-day time period was compatible with what the eviction protection on a tenant's right basis would conflict. But if we have to extend a match, then that's part and parcel of this, that's fine. Any other questions on this one at all? Or comments? All right. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. We have nothing from the Community Redevelopment Agency. That brings us to City Manager. 2 points. You are soft for some reason, Mr. Strauss, in terms of volume. So we can barely hear you, basically.
Any better? Okay. All right. You can hear me okay now? All right.
Sir.
The first item that I have is regarding a task authorization with DRMP for construction engineering and inspection services for the Three Parks Trail East project. The city's Public Works Department continues to implement the Three Parks Trail master plan, which was developed in 2013. Three Parks Trail connects public charities park, Woodland Park, and Peterson Park. The north and south segments of the Three Parks Trail network were open for use in 2015. The city submitted a funding request to the Polk Transportation Planning Organization in 2016 for Three Parks Trail East. A local agency program agreement between the city of Lakeland and FDOT was executed in 2017 to reimburse the city for design, construction, and inspection cost. The Three Parks Trail East segment proposes a 10-foot wide trail along the east side of New Jersey Road between Glendale Street and Waterford Drive. The trail will cross New Jersey Road and Waterford Drive and will continue along the west side of the roadway to Turtle Rock Drive. The Public Works Construction and Maintenance Division will construct the project with in-house resources. Construction is scheduled to begin in April. Public Works solicited a proposal from DRMP, which is one of the city's continuing professional services contracts for construction and engineering inspection services. Funding for these services is in the amount up to $55,072.62 and will be reimbursable through the local agency program agreement with FDOT. Staff will be recommending approval of this task authorization. That completes my presentation on this first item.
Any questions from commissioners? I have one since I use this almost daily. This is the end up being a replacement of the existing sidewalk in a wider trail. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, and it being the same location as that sidewalk, we would just be developing it as we go through.
Yes, the general same location.
Yeah, that's wonderful because it's the only weakness of the trail, and so that's terrific. That is a great trail, by the way, with lots of people walking it increasingly, which is neat to see, or riding their bikes. Any other questions on this one? All right. Next item, please, City Manager Strauss.
Okay, the second item is regarding award of a bid to Hubbard Construction Company and for a contract amendment with Atkins North America for construction oversight of the Runway 9 Category 3 approach lighting improvements Phase 3 of the ILS Category 3 project at Lakeland International Airport. You're all familiar with this ongoing project that was divided into 3 different phases, and we are now ready to commence Phase 3 of the project. The airport previously received approvals from the commission on the other phases, and now we come to you with Phase 3. The approach lighting improvements was advertised under bid number 1054. We had 4 companies responding to the bid. The airport's engineering firm, Atkins North America, along with airport staff, reviewed all 4 bid responses. The lowest bidder, Hubbard Construction Company, was determined to be the most responsive bidder with a bid of $6,260,738.13. Atkins North America will provide the construction administration services for this Phase 3 of the project for a not to exceed amount of $440,340 under an amendment to their existing contract. Staff will be recommending approval of the construction contract with Hubbard Construction Company and the amendment with Atkins North America, both as presented. There will also be an associated appropriation and de-appropriation for this request. And that completes my presentation.
Question I have, Mr. Conrad, is the airport's operating fund surplus what is that created by? That surplus fund?
And I believe Mike Brossard's on as well, but I believe these funds are coming from our capital, our 510 account, and it's part of our capital. So between our 500 account, which has their normal surplus, plus our 510, which is a capital account, it's just a back and forth. But Mr. Brossard can opine if I spoke incorrectly.
No, you're right.
So you're right on the money. In fact, he's feeling quite threatened just in his role because of that accounting.
No, he can have it.
Any other comments you want to add, Mr. Conrad?
No, that's it. I'm going to have comments here shortly on our master plan. So
great. All right. Any other comments you'd like to make for the agenda setting, Mr. Strauss? Okay. That brings us then back to the city manager and ordinances first readings. You're still.
Gotcha.
You're muted.
Sorry. The first ordinance is the vacation of a portion of right-of-way adjacent to 822 Adams Street. This is just probably about a quarter of a mile north of the intersection of Kathleen Road and George Dickens Boulevard on the east side. So I apologize, we don't have a map for you. We'll try to get one between now and Monday. There's a auto repair transmission business there, sort of at the curve. Adams Street has already been vacated to Kathleen Road, so it actually does not go through to Kathleen Road at this point. This business is there instead, and they're just simply the business owners requesting that we vacate an additional portion of Adams Street adjacent to their business so that they can install a security gate. This should not affect anybody's access. This would be the only property that would be affected by the closure of that portion of Adams Street.
Any questions? Commissioner Walker.
Mr. Davis, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that just what abuts that property to the north is the church or the ministry that's there, if I'm not mistaken, is off Quincy. And I know we've in the past have had some reservation. They've had some reservation about, because the road does not go through as you indicated. But would there been a challenge with that, where we vacate that, and the challenge some challenge we've had before. I'm going back a couple of years or so, maybe ago, with the ministry of that church property that butts this. There should not be a problem with that, would it?
Well, as part of this process, we always notify the abutting property owners, so they would have been notified of this. And if there's an objection, we probably would have heard. I see Chuck popping on here.
Yes, and good morning. Actually, that was one of the things that we asked the Alpha Coatings representatives to do, was work with St. Luke's to make sure that, we made them understand that the right-of-way was only going to be split 50-50. And so they provided a letter saying that Alpha Coatings would still continue to have access to and from the east via the existing Adams Street, and that they were okay with that. And so we'll provide that information as well. But we made sure that there was a letter that confirmed that they were okay with that arrangement. And really the primary reason for them to Alpha Coatings to need this property is to be able to circulate their small utility trailers, allow them to come in and out of the site instead of relying solely on Kathleen Road, that they would be able to use Adams Street to get back over to Lincoln Avenue. But the two property owners have been working very well together, and we don't certainly foresee any issues at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Barnby, and thank you, Mr. Davis.
Great question, Commissioner Walker. Thank you, Mr. Brumby. Any other questions on this one? All right, let's go to the second item on item 2.
Item 2 is an amendment to the firefighters' pension ordinance to bring it into consistency with the Internal Revenue Code changes that have occurred. You did something similar for the general employees pension ordinance, and we've also got one for the police pension system that probably will be coming to you at the next meeting as well. This does two main things. One, it increases the minimum required distribution age from 70 and a half to 72, which is consistent with what we did once again with the general employees pension plan. And the second thing it does is allow the surviving beneficiary of a member of the plan who dies before retirement to be able to receive their benefit over the lifetime of the surviving beneficiary. Currently, it provides for payment over a 10-year period. So this allows that beneficiary to select receive their benefit over their lifetime instead. But it's done on an actuarial equivalent basis. So it would not result in the plan paying out any more money. It would just be reduced and paid over a longer period of time. Those are the two main things that this accomplishes.
Any questions on either of those? Third item, 21015.
The third item is an exercise that we go through every 3 years. We have to adopt the latest version of the fire code. And Jared Simpson has been working with the fire department on this. I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thank you, Palmer. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. This item is a proposed ordinance. As Palmer explained, it would expressly adopt the most current version of the Florida Fire Prevention Code, along with a few local amendments. And for your benefit, I'd like to just take a quick moment to explain the process for adoption of the fire code. Under Chapter 633 of the Florida statutes, Florida's chief financial officer is also designated to act as the state fire marshal. And so the state fire marshal's office is housed within Florida's Department of Financial Services. And that statute also requires the state fire marshal to adopt a fire prevention code based on a national standard. that's created by a group called the National Fire Protection Association, and we commonly refer to them as the NFPA. And the NFPA creates several codes, but two of them are applicable here. It's their fire code as well as their life safety code, which we commonly refer to as NFPA 1 and NFPA 101. Under the state statute, this process occurs every 3 years, and the state fire marshal is directed by that statute to adopt NFPA 1 and NFPA 101 by reference, and then to make any changes to those codes as necessary to accommodate the particular needs of the state of Florida. So the state fire marshal goes through this by an administrative rulemaking process. And once these NFPA codes are adopted by the state, they become the law of the land across the entire state of Florida through the Florida Administrative Code. But we commonly refer to these codes collectively as the Florida Fire Prevention Code. Now, here in the city of Lakeland, our fire chief and our fire marshal have the duty to enforce the Florida Fire Prevention Code as it is adopted by the state. And the statute gives them a little bit of discretion and interpretation authority, but ultimately these are state codes, and state fire marshal is designated by the statute as the final interpretive authority over these codes. So we're given a little bit of wiggle room to amend the code, but the statute requires that our local amendments strengthen the requirements of the code and provide a greater level of protection to the citizens. Local jurisdictions are not allowed to weaken the code or remove any requirement that is imposed by the state. All local amendments are reviewed by the state fire marshal's office to ensure that they meet this requirement, and also for the state fire marshal to determine whether or not a local amendment should be adopted on a statewide basis. If the state fire marshal chooses not to adopt a local amendment, then the local amendment will sunset as part of the triennial review process that I've just described. So that's an overview of the state process. And as for the proposed ordinance that is being brought before you, generally speaking, all of the proposed amendments are provisions that the city of Lakeland has historically required for some time. However, we are modifying some of the language in hopes of providing a little bit better clarity to the folks that use this ordinance. I'll also note that we are updating the fee resolution for inspections and permits, but that will be brought before you at second reading should this ordinance move forward. And just, there's no intention of changing any of the existing fee amounts. We just intend to consolidate the two separate fee resolutions into one. And with that, the fire chief and the fire marshal are here to answer any technical questions about the specific proposed amendments. And I'll stand for any legal questions regarding the ordinance or the process that I've described. Thank you, Mr.
That was a great recap. Commissioner Salich.
Yes, Gerard and Chief Riley, the ramifications of passing this for current and ongoing developments, will this cause any contractor to have to redo any construction to be in abeyance of this ordinance?
Commissioner, I would defer to the fire marshal for that, but I don't think from all the conversation we had and all the going through and consolidating this and trying to give some clarity to what the language says, there's no new requirements being added to this ordinance. It's just clarifying so that our customers know and understand ahead of time rather than getting caught with something in the 11th hour. But I would defer to the fire marshal.
Yes, Commissioner Selvage, there would be no changes. We've had these items in our ordinance for over 30 years. So we are currently enforcing this as we have, I think, 180 days to get our ordinance in place. So we are enforcing this as we go on, just as we would have last year before the code was adopted. So there should be no changes for any of our contractors or developers.
Thank you, Cheryl. So just to summarize, there's no chance that the fire marshal could come in and said the law has changed, so therefore we need you to do this over.
The code changed December 31st of 2020. So there were some changes into the Florida Fire Prevention Code that we do have to enforce if the project came to us January 1st or later. If they had their permit in before that, they get to stay with the old code. Our ordinance didn't change, so there's nothing on our ordinance that will create any type of change.
Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. So the fire code is something that I've heard a lot from contractors and builders is a big source of stress. And the permitting and inspection process leads to a lot of delays and expenses that they didn't foresee. And so I was glad to hear the chief say that he made some modifications for customers to have more clarity. But how would I have reassurance to know that our customers have more clarity with this new wording, since none of my colleagues are contractors or builders? I would really, before I voted on something like this, like to hear from some of those customers and contractors to see if in fact this does provide them with more clarity.
There's two, and so I'm going to take Commissioner Madden's point and ask Palmer or Assistant City Attorney Simpson to comment. This is really conforming with what the state is requiring from the state fire marshal, and any ordinance changes would be thereafter, specific to our community that would apply would be thereafter. Is that correct?
Well, the local amendments are different from the state code. So those are where we're requiring something above and beyond the state code. All of those in some form or fashion have been in our previous adoptions of the state code as local amendments. The one thing that I think this is an issue that came up about a year ago is the 12,000 square foot requirement. I believe that was associated with maybe Dean Saunders building south of the McDonald's on 98 Bartow Highway. The way it was worded previously, I think, was a little confusion as to whether the requirement for sprinkling kicked in at 12,000 square feet for the total building or 12,000 square feet per floor. I think it had always been interpreted by locally as 12,000 square feet for the entire building, which is when the requirement to add a sprinkler system came into effect. But it was not worded as well as it could be. The way this current adoption makes it very clear that it's 12,000 square feet for the entire building is when the requirement to install a sprinkler system kicks into effect.
Palmer, I can add to that a little bit. When I reviewed the previous ordinance, and the term that was used is it said per floor gross area for the 12,000 square feet. And I believe that was probably a Scrivener's error, because the term of art is typically gross floor area as opposed to gross floor area as opposed to floor gross area. So I think those two words got switched around in the old ordinance somehow, and it did create a little bit of confusion on that requirement. And what we have done in this iteration of the ordinance is we've clarified that is 12,000 square feet determined by using the gross floor area measurement for all stories combined. So it's much more clear as to when that requirement would kick in.
Do you have any other questions with respect to that, Commissioner?
Yes, I just wanted to say that, this is my fourth year as a commissioner, and I still hear a lot with regard to fire codes and the difficulty of getting permits and inspections. And so for me, I will not be voting for this, only because it's my only point of leverage or power to bring a discussion. Similar to other things that we try to bring into a community conversation, like the Public Improvement Fund or other things that we just, kind of vote on collectively, and then time passes and nothing's changed. I really feel like it is imperative that we hear from our customers, that we hear from different contractors, builders, small businesses who've had to go through this onerous process of getting permits and inspections and follow the fire codes. had difficulty. And I think it was the mayor who actually recommended to Greg Ruthven one time how important it was at Ford Motor Company to hear from your vendors, just to give feedback, to the engineers and to the people who are making the automobiles, to make sure that it wasn't just from one perspective, but you were really taking into consideration the customers. And so it's not that I'm opposed to anything necessarily because I'm not an expert in the field here, but I will not be, voting just as kind of showing support for the constituency that I hear from that are frustrated, who don't feel like they have a voice and don't have any power. And I just want to make sure that their voices are being heard and reflected in these conversations.
Mr. Mayor, we can't hear you for some reason. It's showing that you're on, but we can't hear you. Still can't hear you.
All right, I could read lips, so I think it was McLeod. All right, Commissioner McCarley's nodding her head. So how much variation is there across cities and counties on these local ordinances where we say we're strengthening what the state code says? If I'm operating and putting buildings in different cities, different counties in the state, is it a very different experience? Are the expectations, is there a material difference in those?
I'll speak to that. There are, I didn't count, but I know there's 37 ordinances that have sprinkler requirements listed, and there were probably another 30 some ordinances on the state website. So there are quite a few communities who have items in the ordinance, in an ordinance that are what would be considered above code. They range from jurisdictions that require every single commercial building, regardless of the size, to be sprinklered, to items such as most of our ordinance are things that have to be in place because of how we operate, how our firefighters fight the fire, is what most of our items are.
Commissioner, if I may, I would also add to that a lot of times when we're interpreting these codes that we don't make these decisions in a vacuum. I know that our fire marshal is very well connected in a large group of fire marshals and inspector professional organizations out there, and they share that information. They bounce that stuff off of one another all the time, just as I am very deeply involved in the Florida Fire Chiefs Association, and I speak to fellow fire chiefs on a daily basis looking for second opinions and clarity on some of these decisions as well. So.
Well, and I can appreciate that, Chief, but my perspective is not from if our rules are right. I have no doubt that you all, you just won the fire chief of the state. So I have no doubt that these are important and that you get all of the feedback from the fire perspective. I guess that's why I brought into the conversation the Ford automobile example, because what I'm worried about is the customer-centric approach and how easy it is for our customers to interpret the code and get the permit and to be able to go through the inspection in expedited fashion so that they don't go like during the strategic planning retreat, how I talked about go without a paycheck, because that's what it means to them to not be able to open up their business. They're going without a paycheck weeks and weeks on end, not getting these inspections taken care of. So for me, it's really not so much is the code valid, it's what are we doing to make sure our customers have every bit of information they need. How are we making sure we're giving them certainty and clarity? And that's what I don't feel confident in. And so that's why I'm bringing this up, because I have no other time to bring this up except for now when we're voting on the validity of these codes, updating these codes. And this will be my fourth time voting on these codes. And still, I don't feel like we've been able to have a forum in which we've been able to hear from our customers and to be able to make some of these modifications that would streamline the process and not cost them so much, and really get them to the point of exasperation before they're actually able to get their CO.
Unfortunately, we still can't hear you.
Did we have Mayor Pro Tem
Yes.
Carly take over?
Commissioner Walker.
just want to make sure, thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I want to make sure I'm hearing Commissioner Madden's concern properly. So are we saying, Commissioner Madden, that it's a process that, you think that we need to make sure that we're, of course, having our customers, builders, contractors, et cetera, hear from them? A process is what we need to have conversation about from them, or is it the code that that we're looking at to have adopted here, this being the first reading, of course, the problem? So I want to make sure I'm hearing you. Is process the problem that we continue to hear, as you say, from our customers, the builders, the contractors, et cetera, or is it the codes that that's being that want to be approved or modified or corrected, changed, the challenge, or is it all of it?
Commissioner Madden.
We're approving codes and we're only hearing from one side. From the experts on the fire side, on the rationale as to why we have the codes, we're not hearing from the customers who have to actually read the code and implement the code. And, their whole business depends on that being understandable and streamlined and efficient. And so, here we're just going to vote this through, and we're hearing from one side, and we're not hearing from the constituents. And that's what we're hired to do. That's what we're elected to do, is to represent the voice of the constituency.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
It's not great, but we can hear you.
I apologize. I was trying to make a mic change midstream. So, Commissioner Mann, I think we're talking about two things, and I appreciate your advocacy with respect to process. This is an alignment with, and so you're right, this gives you an opportunity for that other conversation. But I also know that City Manager Strauss is working on permitting alignments at the same time with staff, and which I think is a wonderful initiative that's taking place, so that what we don't do is create surprises later for our businesses who are trying to open. And we have done a little bit of that, which I think is the thing that you're most concerned about. What we're looking at on the sheet that we were sent this morning is really the important items covered by this ordinance that really affect us are those 5 pictured items below on that attachment. And those are really the only things we want to focus on and consider with respect to this approval, as I understand it. And it does not displace the need to have some kind of an input session or some other opportunities where we could hone our permitting processes separately, but that's probably a different conversation and another initiative and effort. Commissioner Fire Chief Riley.
I just got promoted, Mayor. Thank you. I just think that in fairness to all parties, and also in the spirit of making sure that everybody has the full information, we've had a lot of conversation about the interpretation of the 1,200 square foot rule as it pertained to the Saunders project. I don't know if you all have been updated on that, but I got to give kudos to the fire marshal and her team, because they went out to the job site and they met with the developers and the contractors there at Saunders, and they found a much more economical solution that did not require a sprinkler system in that building. And so the customer service there, I think, was exemplary, and they saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars on not having to put a sprinkler system in that building. And these are the things that I see from the prevention division every day, that you guys may or may not hear the good side of all that. For just one quick example about a quick turnaround for inspections, we had a call late last Friday. We had a contractor that was under the gun, and he was pleading with us, I need another inspection, because they did a final and there was a few discrepancies there. And it was, if I don't get this done today, I'm going to be faced with a huge fine. And late in the day on Friday, the inspector stopped what he was doing, went back out there, did the inspection, and signed off, and was able to save that contractor a lot of money. But that's the kind of things that I see every day with Fire Marshal and her inspectors, that they're going above and beyond to provide that customer service. And I'm not so sure that we always hear the good side of all that. Thank you.
I think that's important. And so, not to erode that at all. And I am appreciative of the very increased attentiveness that we sense in a lot of very successful transitions. I know the concern Commissioner Madden has comes from voices that we have had talk to us and about process. And I think it's maybe some of our own process improvement, and we ought to be able to do that, but we ought to stay focused at least on Monday with respect to this particular issue. Commissioner Walker.
Again, I want to make sure I understand. This is the first reading anyway, is that correct? This is just the first reading, so we have some more discussion to have. And I can appreciate, and I would agree with what my colleague is saying about process. We've been here I've been here for 11 years now or more about, our process as far as getting a permitting and getting final approval, getting, certificate that you need to get for occupancy's sake. I've been here for 11 years plus. So I agree with you, my dear sister. If it's something that we need to make sure we have a workshop and continue to make sure we can refine this thing and make it better, let's do it. But I want to make sure we're not confusing, and that I don't want to be confused. And if I am, correct me by what this ordinance, this particular item that we're looking at now to be first reading and to become second reading, because process I think is different from what I think this is, and I could be incorrect. So that's what I want to make sure of.
Commissioner McCarley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think there are a couple concurrent conversations going on here. One being that what Commissioner Madden is saying, and which I agree with, is when we look at the proposed ordinance and adopting the Florida Fire Prevention Code 7th edition with certain local amendments, that seems to me like that's more of the rubber, those local amendments. So if we're saying that 37 other municipalities or whatever Mrs. Edwards said, in the 30 area of other codes that we've seen, well, that's out of 400 and something fire departments in the state of Florida, or whatever that number is. That's a very small increment in comparison to what the rest of the state is doing locally and what the certain local amendments are. So I do think it's part of the discussion is that those local amendments are really what we're talking about. I think feeling comfortable with adopting the Florida Fire Prevention Code is one thing, but if you separate out those local amendments, that's would be my concern. So those would be two different pieces, and maybe we can have more information. As Mr. Simpson said in his presentation, we do have wiggle room. Well, we want to make sure that that wiggle room has our constituents' best interest as a piece of that discussion. We don't want to negate. I commend Fire Chief Riley and our fire marshal on all the work they do. I think they are extraordinarily great at their jobs, and I appreciate them keeping our community safe, and I totally understand that. But to Commissioner Madden's point, we do have to have a dialogue that's both not just subject matter experts, but we need to have a transdisciplinary approach so we know what the implementation really looks like on the local level. So I agree with Commissioner Madden. I think before the second reading, we need to probably have a discussion, another agenda study about those certain local amendments. Those are what give me great pause in supporting it.
Assistant City Attorney Simpson.
Thank you, Mayor. The state fire marshal does publish the local amendments, and I just reviewed the website, and there are 59 different counties and cities that have local amendments published on the state fire marshal's website. So I just wanted to clarify that question. And then I also wanted to add that the state fire code is a very complicated code, and that's what we were given from the state to enforce. And I just pulled up a copy of it, and it's a 1,422 page document. So it's a very complex area. We do have wiggle room, mostly on how we conduct business and inspections, but we are given a very complicated code from the state that we have to enforce. And these local amendments are really we're limited to strengthening that document, and so that's what we have for you.
All right. So pretty substantial conversation for a first reading. And we thank you. And, but it does clarify the point that we want to make sure we're up to speed on those amendments. Yes.
Should we at least cover the 5 items that you see on the handout so that you understand what the items are? The first item is basically providing a definition. When we use fire code, we have to use the definitions that are provided in the code when we're interpreting and deciding how to utilize the code. The Florida Fire Prevention Code does not use the term enclosed structure. It's not defined. You'll see in our sprinkler portion that we have used the word enclosed structure, so we felt it necessary to actually provide that definition. So that's why the definition has been added. The second item is pertaining to a wet standpipe in a parking garage or repair garage that's 2 stories or higher. Actually, if it becomes 3-story, by state statute, it's required to be sprinklered and have a standpipe. Standpipes usually come into play at about 45 feet vertical. Why we have this is because we have no apparatus, and they don't make fire apparatus that could enter such a structure. So it's very difficult for our firefighters to actually fight a fire up on a 2nd story of a parking garage or such structure quickly and expeditely, you know. So this has been in there again for like 30 years as a way for the firefighters to have water. This is just bringing water up to that 2nd floor of the parking garage so that we can get the fire out. The third item is the one about the sprinkler system, the 12,000 square feet. Again, looking back in our ordinances, this has been exactly how it was worded before in our ordinance since 1993. And there were items about sprinklers dating back even further. This, the fire code and the building code have actually almost caught up to our ordinance. So the 12,000 square feet is actually required across the occupancy types in our fire code, except for one area, and that's for new businesses. If their occupancy is totally just office space business, although there are some exceptions to that in building code, that is the only place where the 12,000 square feet is actually higher. So it's not across the board every commercial building, because fire code already requires it at 12,000 square feet for the other types of occupancies. The other item is about the fire department connection and the fire hydrant. Again, the fire code basically states that it's up to the AHJ where to put the fire department connection. That's what is in the code. So we are trying to give that to our contractors up front in a document so they know what we need. We need that hydrant to be within 100 feet of the fire department connection, and that is because of the amount of fire hose we carry and the ease of getting that hooked to a hydrant to our truck so that we can fight a fire. That's why this one has been in the ordinance. And then the last one is about access boxes. Again, we've required Knox boxes on buildings for over 30 years. That is what was required. And actually code has this in there now. And talking with our city attorney, Jared Simpson, he felt like we were covered. We felt like we needed to just be a little clearer, and we wanted it added because code says if there's a lock on the door, basically, we can make them put a Knox box in. We don't make all of our commercial buildings put Knox boxes in. We only require those who have a sprinkler system or a fire alarm, because that is why we go for false alarms. And when our crews show up for an alarm, we can either break the door down or we can use the key in the box. So if we break a door down to breach, to get in to see if there's a fire, we've done over $1,000 damage. $450 box to put the keys safely in, that we can then relock the door and secure their building before we leave is actually saving our business owners quite a bit. So that's kind of the brief overview of the main part of what we've added to the ordinance.
So are there any questions for Fire Marshal Edwards on that? All right, I think we're good. Thank you very much for the discussion. Very healthy discussion, very important to make sure we're getting input, and I think we're all on the same page on this together. So we're not sensing a disagreement, we want to not have a disconnect built in. All right, next item.
All right, under resolutions, the first one is adopting the latest version of the Lakeland Lender Airport Master Plan, and I believe Gene wanted to make a few comments about that.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here. And if you allow me a little bit of time this morning, I'm not going to take up too much time, but I want to do two things. One is obviously to go over the master plan real quick. You know, obviously a lot of you, everybody on the commission has seen this and was a part of the process going through adopting and presenting and putting together the master plan. And then the second piece is to talk a little bit about noise, just so obviously through the strategic planning retreat, there's been a lot of discussion obviously out in the public, and also during the strategic planning retreat reference noise. So I just want to make sure, you know, I'm able to brief everybody up a little bit on it, what exactly is happening, and also our efforts to mitigate noise as much as possible. But first, back to the master plan. You know, our effort for where we are today started back in 2018. It was about a 2-year period for us to move through this. Obviously, again, most of the city commissioners were part of our technical advisory committee, which is also made up of other stakeholders and airport tenants. Obviously, we had several meetings with the city commission through the process, not only in the advisory board, commission meetings, and we also had our large public meeting back in January of 2020, where we had over 150 people show up to the meeting to be able to evaluate and provide comments, reference our master plan and the ultimate alternative, which is what you're looking at right here. Just to go through a couple points of what we're looking at and some of the highlights of the master plan. The biggest thing and the biggest change for the airfield specifically is, if you all recall, if you can see my cursor, right here is our what we call 523, so our crosswind runway. We are going to take that runway out and we will build a new parallel runway to our large runway, which is up here, 927, and build a new parallel runway to the south. Obviously, with that, there will be obviously impacts to Sun and Fun, which obviously, you know, again, they're well aware of, and they were part of the master plan process as well. But it will require us over time, as we're developing out the plan and specifically building this new runway, we will need to relocate these buildings. We're working with Sun and Fun to develop their master plan on where ultimately they would like these facilities to go. Once we start moving down the path to put this new runway in, which is probably in the 8 to 10 year horizon. I say 8 to 10 years, it could be sooner, it could be later, but that's based on our operations here at the airport as far as air traffic, aircraft landing and departing. That's where I see our window is about an 8 to 10 year time frame. Also, with taking out the runway, and if you, again, specifically for Sun and Fun, if you see down here to the south, these little blue areas, these are just future development areas. And you can see specifically for Sun and Fun to protect, obviously, the fly-in and to make sure they're viable for the next 50 years. You know, we're not going to develop any of this area other than what they're going to do over time with moving facilities due to the new runway. But these light blue shaded areas, again, taking out this runway and with the new parallel runway allows us to open up this about approximately 65 acres in the northeast corner of the airport. Just to give you reference, where my cursor is right here, this is Station 7, and the terminal building is right here. So there's about 65 acres we'd be able to develop in the future once we do take out the crosswind runway and put in the parallel runway. The other component of the master plan, and is what as you see in these blue buildings here, these are all future hangar development. And this will meet, based on our forecast, our next 20-year based aircraft forecast. So what you see with these blue buildings will be what we build to accommodate new aircraft that would come to the airport. It doesn't mean it's going to look exactly like this. For example, this is where the new FBO is going, and this already looks different. But generally, this is our concept for where future hangar development will go on the airport. Also, just to show you here, and again, this is all on our website. You can go to lakelandairport.com. You can go to About Us. There's a drop-down box, Administrative Documents. And there you can find this exact map that I'm showing right now, and also review our master plan. There's links to both of those pieces, and folks can go through that and review it. But this gray area, this is the existing Amazon facility, and this is what we're just showing as a concept for the future development for Amazon in the future. So that sums up pretty much my master plan specific presentation. Again, we've been working on this for 2 years. The FAA approved it back in September of last year, and we're already moving forward with implementing pieces of the master plan. If you recall, we brought to you Taxiway Echo, which is this taxiway here. We're going to change the taxiway name so it says something different here, but this is Taxiway Echo with the new Sierra. We just brought that to the commission last time to move forward with the design on that. So we're already moving forward with our master plan. Now, if you'd allow, real quick, talking specifically about noise. So just a little background. So when the FAA looks at noise and when they evaluate noise as we develop, or with Amazon in their first phase, this is the picture of how they evaluate and look at noise. So essentially, these are our noise contours for the airport. This picture comes out of our master plan. And where they are most concerned about noise, specifically the FAA, is what's called the 65 DNL, which is this blue line that is encompassed and is maintained inside our property boundary. So when we do an EA, again, whether it was for Amazon or even go through the master plan process, they're focused on this blue line. And if there are homes that are inside this blue line and that would designate significant impact. So what that means, if there were homes inside this blue line, that the FAA, we would work with them to potentially buy those homes or to mitigate with noise mitigation, insulation, or window treatments, to provide additional noise mitigation for those homes if they're inside that 65 DNL. So that's how the FAA looks at noise. Now we know the reality is, now this is a picture of our noise complaints. Obviously since Amazon started operations, it also has air show, the red are air show, from our holiday flying festival. There's NOAA complaints, flight schools, and other stuff. But generally the blue dots are our Amazon noise complaints. So again, in the last slide, I just show you where the FAA focuses on noise, again, is in this close-in arena or inside the airport boundaries. This is reality, right? So the majority of our noise complaints, this is grasslands up here, and you can see all the blue pins. And then over here, this is South Florida, and then points east of South Florida out to Lakeland Highlands. I believe the mayor lives right here in this area. So these are really where our noise complaints are being generated. So there's a couple outliers here and a couple down here, but again, the majority is coming to the east of the airport, from South Florida east, moving out to Lakeland Highlands, and then up here to grasslands. Now, to get a little bit more granular, when we're talking about runway 27 arrivals, so again, here's the airport. This is the approach end of 27. Obviously, to the top of the page is north. And as an aircraft are coming in and landing 27, again, this is South Florida. And then you can see, obviously, the homes that have been built, obviously, over time, some even before, the airport was here. But this is obviously a very sensitive area for us. So when these aircraft come in, they're generally getting out over Lake Hancock for the straight in, and then they fly the yellow line into runway 27. When we're looking at runway 27 departures, which is our preferred departure route, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but this is again runway 27, and when they're making a turn to the north, they generally go over County Line Road. Now again, they can be on either side. This isn't their exact flight path. This is basically an average of where they're flying. It can be left or right of this line, but you can see as they turn to the north where they're going over the warehouses and County Line Road. And if they're going south, they're generally moving in this direction. This is Morgan Creek here, and this is obviously where all the homes in Southwest Lakeland will be built over time or are being built. So you can see what's happening, when they make that turn to the south or when they're making that turn to the north. Now switching gears to our other runway, this is runway 9. So as aircraft are coming from the west, landing to the east, this is Plant City over here. And you can see there's just not a lot of development out here, so we don't generate a lot of complaints out here. And this is also our runway where our instrument landing system is being put in. So this is our preferred arrival runway. And again, not a lot of complaints that are generated off of this approach. And next we have runway 9 departures. So again, runway 9 here, and as they take off, you can see this is grasslands here. So they're given a, turn left 360, and they go over the top of grasslands close into the airport. So obviously there's impact here. We try to get them up as high as possible, but that abrupt turn going over grasslands Obviously, again, a lot of complaints generated in this area. And again, this is our southbound turn coming off of Runway 9. Some complaints down here, some in Christina here, not a ton of complaints, again, but this area is impacted here. And again, these are not the exact flight paths. Sometimes over grasslands, they get kind of over here into Oak Bridge, or they're even inside of grasslands here sometimes. But generally, this is the average of where these aircraft are flying as they're departing. Real quick to talk about some of our mitigation efforts. As you all have heard me talk, or I've talked to you specifically, number one, our biggest goal is our preferential runway use program. And I will tell you, we've been successful over the last several weeks working with our tower here at the airport and also with the FAA to get that implemented. So essentially over the overnight periods from 10 p.m. in the evening till 7 a.m. in the morning, when the winds are calm or even up to a 7-knot tailwind, aircraft at night will land from the west to the east and obviously limit the amount of exposure to noise sensitive areas, as there is not a tremendous amount of development out to the west of the airport. The other piece is in the mornings, again, when the winds are calm up to a 7-knot tailwind, they're going to depart 27 and head up to the north over County Line Road, or depart down here to the south. And actually, I believe that went into effect this morning. I was up at 5 o'clock with my son, and I was listening to ground controllers. They were giving instructions and the routing for the aircraft to depart the aircraft. And they were on 27 this morning, even though the winds were favoring 9, but the tailwind component was below the 7 knots. So that is already in place and moving in a positive direction. The last piece, the second piece is, and which obviously a lot of you are aware of and was talked about in the Lakeland Ledger, is to get the aircraft up higher with a higher initial departure altitude. So that is happening as well. And the third piece is, so when aircraft, again, because of our noise sensitive areas, with South Florida being right here and out to Lakeland Highlands, we are looking to change the approach into 27. So this would be a new visual approach to fly down the parkway. Essentially, this is Lake Hancock here, hit a point about 10 miles out, and then actually fly straight, what we would call the parkway approach, to have the aircraft fly directly over the parkway, and then to sidestep once they hit South Florida Avenue and sidestep into the runway for landing into runway 27. So in this effort, it is doable. It's not going to happen overnight. It's something that the FAA is engaged with us now and we're working on, but it's going to take us several months to get that put in place. Now, what I will tell you, though, one thing with however we move aircraft around, right now they're obviously impacting this area, but even putting them over the top of the parkway, others will be affected. And so, it's a balance. It's a balance with what we're trying to do, because wherever we put the aircraft, there still will be impact regardless. So we're trying to limit, obviously, and limit the impact to the least amount of people possible. But again, with whatever we do or however we shift things, it is going to create other impacts for other folks. So we just have to be careful with how we're going to do this over time. We are going to look to put together a committee as far as stakeholders, whether it's in this area over here next to South Florida or in Grasslands, and others from the community as well, to help us to make sure we're looking at all of the impacts as we're developing these things, these mitigation efforts as we move forward. So that is all I have for my presentation, but obviously I'm happy to take questions.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Gene. That was a great presentation. When we build a new runway to the south, the one going east and west, how much, I saw the blue line, how much would that, how much further will this affect property to the south? Not very much, another 1,000 feet, 500 feet?
Well, actually, the distance between these two runways is about 800 feet. And so this runway here primarily will be used for arriving aircraft. So as Amazon or any of our other aircraft are coming in, the majority of the aircraft using this will be arriving aircraft. And even if we're departing on this runway, so for example, if we have maintenance on our big runway and we're pushing all the departures to what will be the future 28 left here, heading in this direction with the larger aircraft, with all the development happening in Southwest Lakeland down here, or even with the new development for Morgan Creek here, the larger aircraft are going to miss those areas. That doesn't mean there will be zero impact. They will still hear it. There may be a rumble, but the flight paths will not fly. They will not fly directly over these areas and down to the southwest southwest of the airport and south of Pipkin. Now, it doesn't mean NOAA or our flight schools or others aren't going to be, when the flight schools obviously are operating the racetrack pattern and going in this direction, they will be flying over those areas. But whether it's for future commercial service or Amazon, they will not be flying over the tops of these areas.
Thank you. From looking at your little matrix you put up earlier, it appears we get more response from incoming flights as far as noise goes versus outgoing flights. Is that a fair statement as well?
Well, actually, it's split. I mean, it's because this area here was South Florida to the east out to Lakeland Highlands. Because this is the approach to 2-7, all of these complaints are approach to 2-7 related. All of these complaints in Grasslands are 9 departure related. So it just depends on which runway and if they're departing or they're approaching into the airport. So we don't get any complaints for departures here because we don't depart in this direction. Or they don't fly out in this direction straight out to the east, but they make that turn to the north over Grasslands. Obviously, this is where those complaints are being generated.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Gene, can you give us an estimate in the next 5 years, how much expansion of aircraft traffic is going to occur?
Well, it's specifically to Amazon. What I'll tell you is, so we're at 7 departures right now. I will tell you in 2027, there's forecast to where we would have 22 departures a day. So that's what is in their forecast for the airport. But that obviously does not include commercial service, for example. So when we get commercial service, whoever the operator is, and how that grows over time, if it starts at 3 flights a day, it doesn't mean in a 5-year period it won't be 10 flights per day. So it's, so I would say in the next 10-year period, as far as larger aircraft flying in and out of the airport, I'd say we can be anywhere from 30 to 35 departures a day.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is probably the sweet spot, and I think what we should anticipate. Other commissioners, Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Conrad, for sharing as you did. My only, question would be, as we're discussing the Morgan Creek development area, that the concerns, that I have heard from the different ones regarding that particular development is how it does not play into what the airport's master planning is, and hearing a couple of concerns that our master plan for our airport is not in line with the growth that may happen with the residential situations there. How can you speak to something like that to help support? Because support me understanding, because I say to myself, it's an airport. It's going to be growth. It's going to be planes. It's going to have some noise. I say that myself, but how can we help our residents, understand too, with the master plan development and the growth that's coming with the airport, and even with residential development that may come as well. It is somewhat related as opposed to not being related.
Yes, sir. Well, great question. So specifically to Morgan Creek, or this is again Morgan Creek down here, or any of the homes down at Southwest Lakeland, actually what we've done with the master plan and taking out 523, because I will tell you, my first master plan when I got here, we actually showed 523 and extending that runway out to here, which would have brought all the additional traffic right over the top of Morgan Creek and to all those 4,000 or whatever the number is homes that are going to be built down here in Southwest Lakeland. So the whole purpose of taking this runway out, not only for development, obviously, but to shift it and put it south of our existing main runway 927 was to avoid flying over the top of all this future development. So what we've done with the master plan is actually protected these areas for the future and for their future development. Again, it doesn't eliminate all impacts, but again, our flight paths and how the larger aircraft will depart are not going to be flying over these areas down here, especially all these 4,000 homes are going to be built down here. The other thing is reference development at the airport. We are most concerned with future development off the approach and departure ends of the runways. So for example, this area right here, I think this is Lakeside Preserve or Lakeland Preserve. I can't remember the exact name of the development here, but as you can see, it's all grass right now. This is now all full of homes. And this is essentially, this point right here is 1.5 miles off the departure end of Runway 9. And so this new development anywhere in here, we cannot have that. And if they do, these people are not going to like it. Unfortunately, some people that bought homes in here over the last several months, or even back to this last year in August, did not know that obviously we're going to have Amazon aircraft coming in, but we announced our deal with them and them coming back in May of 2019. And so there's navigation easements here, but people came in and they were not aware of it. So when we were talking about earlier, the flood impacts and how people know these things, these navigation easements are in their deeds. But with the developer, I don't know what's being said or not to these folks as they're building and going to buy homes right under the approach into our main runway. So again, off the ends is critically important to us. And even moving out here to the west, this is County Line Road here. And what's going to happen in Hillsborough County, we have obviously talking with Nicole and with Teresa and Chuck and the Hillsborough County officials over here. We need to get in front of them sooner than later. If this is all warehouse development out here, Strawberry Fields Farms, great. But if there's development for large home tracts and large home, neighborhoods and whatnot, subdivisions, that is not going to be good development for us long term. As you can see, there's just not a lot of development out here. So again, our key areas is to protect off the ends of our existing major runway, primary runway, and the future parallel.
I think that's important to the public to hear and be shared the information as you're just saying, especially so with the potential development with the Morgan Creek situation that we're being confronted with right now, so they can hear and understand and be shared. And I appreciate what you shared with us this morning. It's because I think it's critical that people know that, and development and developers will want to share that information too, I would hope. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Walker, I appreciate you asking that question. I do want us to remember not everybody is bothered by plane noise either. If you land anywhere in the country, you see many housing areas that are near airport approaches and takeoff zones. And so there are people who like that traffic, like watching that kind of thing also. So the real issue becomes making sure that we do the appropriate amount of mitigation that is foreseeable, but also recognizing that there may be some those areas that do want to develop for people who like watching planes. And so it's just that we're going to have those 30 major flights, 30, 35 major flights a day, plus small air traffic that's in addition to that. We're just talking about the large birds in this conversation that go on that. This is an airport that is strategically pivotal to Central Florida's growth between Tampa and Orlando. And as we see more people move to Florida, we're going to have an increased need for other commercial airline airports, and we are ripe for that. And we expect to see that happening in the near term within 24 months or so. So any other comments?
Mayor, if I could make one more comment, and these numbers aren't public as of yet because we're just cleaning it up, and hopefully we'll present something. And Sean doesn't even know this. I haven't even shared it with him yet because we just got the number yesterday. But sorry, sir, if I'm in trouble. So I've talked about over the years our economic impact as far as our airport, and you've heard me say before, the state does the economic impact for all the airports every 4 years. And when I got here in 2010 or 2011, it was 162 million a year. In 2014, it moved up to 285 million. In 2019, you'll recall, we were sitting at 575 million, and we just had it updated by the same consultant that does the state. And I will tell you, it's over our annual economic impact for this airport is now at 1.5 billion. So, people, how did you get to that number and whatnot? It is all the capital improvements we've made into this facility, the private development that's occurred, and also even from our 2019 study, we had 1,500 employees on the airport that were working in our various city-owned airport-operated facilities, and now including Amazon in their building, we're at over 3,200 employees, people that are coming to this airport every day to go to work. So it's a significant increase from where we've been, obviously, over the last decade.
So it's very exciting, and it's a part of our future as not only a city, but as a Polk County area. And we just need to make sure we're maturing in the right ways to protect footprints and informing people, but recognizing this is a very strategic part of the healthy growth of Central Florida. And we really appreciate your leadership in this area, Mr. Conrad.
And again, like I always like to say, a big kudos to my team and thank you all for the support. Because if we didn't have the support by the city commission, the city manager's office, we would not be able to do what we do. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, what's the next item, Mr. Davis?
Well, before we leave that, just similar to the discussion about drainage, it would be helpful if you want to rely on any of that information at the zoning hearings on Monday to possibly hear something about that at the hearing. So if Gene could be available, and maybe Kevin, work with them so that some of those maps could be shown on the screen at that public hearing, that would allow that information to be taken into consideration during the zoning hearings.
Unanimously desired. All right.
All right, the second resolution is a resolution vacating a portion of a drainage easement out at Sandpiper that encumbers a lot out there. This is a very common occurrence in Sandpiper. A lot of the homes, and I believe particularly add-on screen rooms, have been built into the drainage easements out there, and this person has done that as well. I don't know whether it was intentional or not. I don't know, but they are seeking to sell their property, and that's hanging them up on that with financing. We polled the different utilities to see whether they have any objections to vacating a portion of this easement, and they do not object to that. So this will release a portion of the easement that is currently underneath this addition to this home and allow them to sell their home.
Any questions on that? All right, next.
The next item is related to the vacation of the right-of-way on Adams Street that we heard about earlier off of Kathleen Road. This is just simply part of that process that we have to go through. And then the final resolution, you heard from Ms.
Commissioner Reed has a question on the last one.
Sorry, Palmer, I was sitting here and I was trying to read the stuff on the, actually, if you wouldn't mind going back to Seagull, did they build that building without getting a permit? Is that the problem?
I do not know whether they got a permit or not. I can check on that for Monday.
You know, they're getting used to being on the various board and stuff. A lot of people ask for forgiveness versus permission a lot of times, and it's just something I'd like to know about that particular case. Thank you.
Okay. Just writing a note.
I see no other questions.
Okay, the final resolution is related to the mask resolution that you adopted a month or so ago. You heard from Ms. Kate Lake at one of your hearings recently. She had concerns about one of the paragraphs in that resolution that cites different data about positivity rates and number of cases. And so we've checked with our emergency manager on that, and one of the citations in that paragraph relating to a comparison of positivity rate to the rates in July probably should have said compared to June instead of July. So I think she's got a valid point on that. The other data that's in that paragraph, I'm talking to our emergency manager, the data is just constantly in flux, even going backwards. So it's hard to say whether the additional data in that paragraph is right or wrong, it's constantly in flux. I think the bottom line is that the data is still tells a story. The recommendations of the health providers are still in place, and we thought it might just be better just to eliminate that paragraph altogether. I don't think that resolution, rises or falls based on the exact accuracy of that data. So this simply removes that paragraph from that resolution.
Anybody have any? Okay, good. And anyone have any issues with that at all? I thought, in addition, if I can bring this up at this point in time, Mr. Palmer, that we were also going to have a Juneteenth resolution in this agenda.
I am going to be working with Ms. Bailey on the language of that and bring that back at probably the next meeting.
Very good. Any questions at all? All right, miscellaneous reports. We have item 3 open.
Okay, let's see. I believe item 3 is the Keystone item.
Yes, sir.
I think you heard at the last meeting or the one before that the city was receiving an additional $787,276 in CDBG funds to help alleviate the COVID-19 situation. And $150,000 of that is dedicated to providing mortgage relief assistance. We already have an agreement with Keystone Challenge Fund to assist mortgagors with that issue. So this is amending our resolution with Keystone and will provide for them to handle at least an additional 30 applications for mortgage assistance with up to $5,000 of assistance per mortgage. Total budget of $150,000 for that purpose. So this simply allows Keystone to help some of our citizens that are struggling with their mortgage payments with this additional CDBG funds.
Any questions on that for either City Attorney Davis or Ms. Gibson? All right, glad to be able to have that to help. All right, I think that is it then. With respect to the agenda, any items from commissioners?
We do have a utility committee.
I'm sorry, I missed utility, right?
Yes, the one item there is a proposed agreement with Control Components for the replacement of 2 bypass silencers for Macintosh Unit 5. These silencers are used to vent high pressure steam to the atmosphere during the startup shutdown of that unit, or when the system disruptions occur. They're put under a lot of duress when they are called into action. And these are old silencers that actually go back to the original equipment of Unit 5 that need to be replaced. So we are contracting with CCI Control Components as the sole source supplier of the equipment. They're the original equipment manufacturer. They will construct the silencers, and then the silencers will be installed by Lakeland Electric staff during the fall outage of Unit 5. The cost of the work is $106,642, and we have David Holdner here from the plant if you have any technical questions.
David, how do they work?
They have insulation and partitions in there, and they basically take the high pressure steam and flow and they expand it out very quickly, and then the noise is dampened. And it's a process where the original equipment manufacturer had the steam flow parameters for temperature and pressure, and they built a model to attenuate the sound to make sure that we can properly meet our noise limits at the property line. Kind of like a muffler on a car.
Got it. Any other questions? All right, so you're going to be responsible for purchasing silencers. I want you to think about that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. All right, I believe that then is the full agenda, so that takes us into any commissioner comments. And Commissioner Summit.
Thank you, Mayor. This question is for our city manager. Last night, the president signed the COVID rescue bill, or whatever it's called, and it's been reported that there are funds directed towards local governments. What are we doing, Sean, to study that and to see if there are opportunities for us to take advantage of that bill?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. Can everyone hear me okay? Having some problems with my mic this morning. We have, staff has been emailing this morning following, notice of that opportunity. And so we're doing some research. We're trying to, we will want to determine when that funding will be available. What are the eligibility requirements? Are there any spend down requirements, reporting requirements, and exactly what that type of funding can be spent on? So we've got quite a bit of research that is ongoing and really just started, I would say, yesterday, and with some more emails back and forth this morning. So we're trying to understand what all of those different aspects would be related to that funding.
Now, you and I have discussed before the fact that the city has no single point of contact on staff to deal with grant opportunities, and you've indicated you're looking at the possibility of hiring somebody like that on staff. But having that person not here now, so when you say the staff is looking into it, is that spread across departments, or is there a single person you've assigned responsibility for looking at what's available?
It is multiple staff members involved in that process. Certainly, finance with our finance director, Mr. Brossart, and the assistant director there with Deidre, and others are involved in that. But yeah, I do appreciate the comment. I have had some discussions about some of the reorganizing and restructuring of city staff that I'm interested in, and one of those does include, I think it would do the city a good service if we had a grant writer on staff who would then be able to be that direct point for all of that type of research and application and tracking that you're referring to, Commissioner.
All right, thank you, Sean.
Mr. Walker.
I know we have another workshop to get to, Mr. Mayor, so I won't be long in my comment here, but referencing what Commissioner Salvage has asked, I did send or had sent through Ms. Tracy some particular information regarding the American Rescue Plan Act that has been passed by Congress, and it does show, based on size of population for cities, how much we will receive. Again, all the other particulars I can't address. I still will need to have time to share, as I would like to do, if it's permitted, to maybe on Monday, about the Congressional City Conference that was held this past week. So you can hear more about, some things that were discussed and things that may be coming down the tube per se. Thank you.
Sure, and you can always do those updates for us in your comments. That's wonderful. We love to hear about them and stay up to speed. Other comments by commissioners? All right, it is 10:31. Let's take until 10:45 for a break, and then join for the workshop. All right.